Attention darts fans, after searching high and low, to and fro, from coast to coast on Wine and Toast, the award for best hashtag in the game goes to Dynamite Darts Content, and your winner is the weekly Dartscast, baby. 3 words, Dynamite Darts Content. Enjoy the show.
Hello and welcome to the weekly Dartscast. We're back after taking last week off. I'm Alex Moss and joined as always by my co-host, darts statistician, the birthday boy yesterday when we're recording this, Burton DeWitt. How are you doing? I'm assuming you got up to a bit more this year on your birthday than you did last year.
Just a bit more. Played a little darts, went to a restaurant, things that couldn't do, because I could have played darts last year, but I would have had to at home. I played darts with some friends at their place. So I'm doing all right. How are you, Alex?
Good to hear. Yeah, I'm doing all right. Sun's shining here in the UK, but no place I'd rather be than inside talking about darts for a little while. And we've got a busy show this week. A few guests join us later, but there is only one place to start, and that is with Jonny Clayton. The year of the ferret continues. Jonny Clayton backing up his Masters win earlier this year by winning the Premier League on his debut. Does this now cement him as one of the best in the world?
No, because he had already cemented himself as one of the best in the world. This just is, it's the cherry on top. Jonny Clayton, as I've said on this show multiple times, the only person who didn't know Jonny Clayton was as good as he is Jonny Clayton, or was Jonny Clayton is what I should say, because around the time that he won the World Cup with Gerwyn Price last autumn, he started to realize just how good he really is. And he's always had this. When I was doing some of the advanced stats before Christopher Kemp took over, because he was just absolutely brilliant at what he does, so there was no point for me to continue putting in all the hours doing that. But when I was doing some of the stuff, I had a checkout rating back in 2016. This was, 2016 was when Michael Van Gerwen was at his best. And in terms of his Jonny Clayton's ability to check out just any possible combination, adjusted compared to how everyone else was doing, he was the only person on par with Michael Van Gerwen for that year. Granted, in stage events, it was a much smaller sample size. But even still, across the handful of European Tour events, he played a couple of TV events that year, he was on par with Michael Van Gerwen, and no one else was even close in terms of his ability, the percentage of time he would be checking out 130, or the percentage of time he'll be checking out 44, just all of that combined, his overall ability was on par with the world number one. It seems surprising then, even to people who follow darts day in, day out, because Jonny Clayton, we've only seen a little bit of him. He's in second year as a tour card holder, but there was something there. And as we saw more and more of him, especially in 2017 when he made his first televised final, there was obviously a well-rounded game there. But he seemed always surprised at his performances, except, of course, when he played Van Gerwen. He felt like he could beat Van Gerwen, but then would lose to anyone else. But once he knew he was as good as he was, and as good as everyone else knew, he became a force. And that really happened at the end of last year. And by the beginning of this year, when he won the Masters, when he won a couple Players' Championship events, he had cemented himself as one of the best in the world. He was one of the favorites entering the Premier League. We all said that he was a legitimate chance not just to make the finals, but to win the playoffs rather, but to win the entire thing, because he was at that time one of the 4 best players in the world. This is just the cherry on top. He had already cemented his place. This now extends that amount of time. He'll remain as one of the top players in the world, but it's only up from here. He's number 17 in the world, which is a vast under-ranking compared to what he's been able to do. He's a top 10, possibly top 5 player, and now he believes it.
I think you're absolutely spot on. And as you say, when we were looking ahead to the Premier League, Jonny Clayton was the form horse going into the tournament, wasn't he? As you say, he won the Masters to get that final spot in the field. He won a couple other floor titles, a couple more finals as well. And okay, his form tailed off at times during this Premier League season. It's difficult to keep that standard throughout the whole season, all of the games. But he went top on night 5. He then dropped down to 8th, I think, after one of the nights. Then he was back in, then he was out. And then we come to this final week of the season, and he started the week outside the playoffs. First game up, first game back with the fans in the building, and he does a job on Gary Anderson. 8-1 win, 101 average, puts himself back in the top 4. And after that, he doesn't drop out again at the end of any of the nights. He stays in there. And when he needed that form the most, it was there. That game against Gary Anderson, I mentioned the final league game of the season against Dimitri Van den Berg. He just needed to avoid defeat against him to get in the field. Pulls out a 103 average, wins the game, and then the following night comes back 101 average for the night across the two games. And he said he felt the pressure more in that game against Dimitri than he did in the finals night, in the semi-final or the final, because there was that much on the line in that final game. And he produced the goods. And just looking at what he did in that final night of the season as well, the average for the night, 17 out of the 21 legs he won in 15 darts or less. He was 58% on the doubles and picking out a couple of points during those two games as well. 8-2 against Michael van Gerwen. He needed a breaker throw, breaks him in 11 darts, holds him 12 darts to win the game. And the game against Jose de Sousa, he had a break. He was 6-4 up, comes back after the interval, wins that second session 5-1 to win the title. So he is a player that, when the going gets tough, he is able to produce the goods, and that is a good trait to have. So for me, yeah, I think, like you say, he is one of the best in the world right now. The rankings, that's the only thing you'd say doesn't reflect it at the moment, because he's won more in non-ranking events the last 6 months than he's won in the last 2 years in ranking events. But the way his form's going, that he's proven time and time again this year and over the last 6 months, dating back to that World Cup win, if he carries on going the way he is, adds one of the big ranking titles to his name. He's been in the top 16 before, but how far can he go now? Can he get top 10, top 8, even further? I think the ceiling, we've got to say, is a lot higher now for Jonny Clayton than we'd maybe have predicted 12 months ago.
Yes, that's a good point you said there at the end. The ceiling's higher now, and that I think is the big thing that's different. He'd already, in my opinion, cemented himself, but the ceiling is even higher. Now, we've talked about Jonny Clayton. The other two debutants also made their mark. Jose de Sousa reaching the final, Dimitri van den Bergh finishing fifth after having a chance to knock Jonny Clayton out before the playoffs. How would you rate, though, this year's Premier League overall?
Well, firstly, credit has to go to you, Burton, because when we recorded our season preview for the Premier League back in late March, early April time, we said one of the questions we had on the show was, what are you most looking forward to about this season? And you said the debutants. You were looking forward to seeing how all three of those got on, and you said that they could all do some damage in the Premier League, and that is exactly what they've done. They were all proven winners over the last 12 months. They all deserved their spot in the field, and they backed it up, didn't they? Two of them making the final, and that's 2 years in a row now that we've seen two debutants in the Premier League get to the final. Last year we had Glenn Durrant beating Nathan Aspinall in the final. This year, of course, Jonny Clayton beating Jose de Sousa in the final. You look back to the history of the Premier League, if you like, and that's not something that's happened very often. In fact, before last year, the only other time that had happened was the very first year, Phil Taylor against Colin Lloyd. Sometimes the debutants don't take to the Premier League, and okay, it's been different the last couple of years. Last year, it started in front of the fans and ended behind closed doors. This year, started behind closed doors and we saw it finish in front of fans. But you've still got to play the best players week in, week out, or night in, night out, as we've seen with the last couple of Premier Leagues. But yeah, I think that's been a big part of this season, seeing how well the debutants have done, and three of them as well. Sometimes you maybe get one or two come into the field, but we had three this year, and they all proved their worth. Two get into the playoffs, one having that shot, as you said, Dimitri, in the final game of the season. If he got a win, he'd have been in there instead of Jonny Clayton in that final night of the season. As far as whether it was a good season or a bad season, I think it really did lift last week, having the fans back in for that final stretch of the 5 nights, because I think the third week, I think we had 3 nights that week, it kind of felt a little bit flat, and we were just waiting, weren't we, for the fans to come back. But having them back was good to see, and we saw with the players as well how they reacted to it. Jonny Clayton, I'm trying to go back now and think the last time he won a leg and didn't point to the camera or look to the camera after, he certainly loved having the fans back involved. And Jose de Sousa as well, we're going to come on to talk about him a bit more later as well, but what he was able to do last week, and he was getting involved with the fans as well, which was great to see. So I think, as I say, given the circumstances that we've had with this Premier League, it did really pick up in that final week, and the emergence of the new stars, if you like, cementing their place at the top.
Yeah, and I'll go back to what you already said that I said. Wasn't that long ago, at least compared to normal, because of how condensed this Premier League season was. It was the shortest Premier League season on record, 1 year after the longest Premier League season on record. Just how the debutants took to the Premier League, as well as Nathan Aspinall, who was one of the players who had the most question marks going into the Premier League. He wasn't a debutant, he was a debutant last year. But how the 3 debutants on one of the 2 who was on a second go did was really just remarkable. They were 4 of the top 5. Only the former world number 1 was able to break up that party at the top of the table. And that really set the scene. And it wasn't because the other players struggled. Glenn Durrant aside, and Credit to Glenn, who had some bants with us about his performance. But him aside, everyone had their moments. Even Rob Cross, who got relegated, he didn't do well those last few nights, and that's why he got relegated, despite having the highest point total ever of a player who got relegated. But everyone had their moments. But the debutants just had more of them. And you had Dimitri Vandenberg, who averaged over a ton for the Premier League and still not able to get through to the playoff stage. You had Jose de Sousa, also a debutant, average over a ton. You had Jonny Clayton average over 99. If you look at the first 10 years of the Premier League, or 9 years rather of the Premier League, only 2 players averaged over 99 for an entire Premier League. Phil Taylor every single year and Raymond van Barneveld in 2009. And you had all 3 debutants manage to do it this year. They were the only 3 players who did it, but they all managed to do something that only 2 players were able to do. For the first 8 years of the Premier League, before Michael Van Garen joined the party in 2013, and Dave Chisnell shortly thereafter averaged over a ton. But in the first 8 years of the Premier League, only 2 players averaged over 99, and all 3 debutants did. That tells you just how good they were able to do across 16 nights of darts against the other best players in the world. And the fact that the rest of the field, Glen Durrant aside, was playing at a similar standard, this is one of the best Premier Leagues ever. One of the most competitive. Okay, we did start to see some separation between the top 5 and everyone else at the end. But even Peter Wright made a good run at it from completely dead to getting himself, he came with very close, had a chance to finish 5th despite being dead and buried with 4 matches to go. Still nearly finished 5th, which tells you everything you need to know. It's how good all of these players are. They did a great job just getting this event off and running, but the players carried it even further.
And now we'll move on to our first guest on this week's show, and it is with the former champion of the world and the Sky Sports pundit and commentator, Mark Webster. I'm delighted to say I'm joined by the former champion of the world and the Sky Sports pundit and commentator, Mark Webster. Thanks for the time, Mark. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. Enjoying the weather. It's nice. So, yeah, no, I'm in a good place. All right, yeah.
Good man. Well, I won't keep you too long. You can enjoy the sunshine. Let's start with the Premier League. The season concluding last week, and for the first time, we've got a Welsh winner, Jonny Clayton, lifting the title on debut. A 101 average for finals night, 58% on the doubles. How impressed were you with his performances coming away from Milton Keynes?
Yeah, I was impressed in the whole campaign, even in defeat when he lost. He never let it materialise into a bad run, and I know how that can happen in the Premier League. But he was ready for the Premier League, and he said at the beginning it might be his only chance. Well, it's not now, is it? He's back next year already, and he's a champion, and he deserves it. He's a great player, great attitude, and someone that I think the fans really take to. And if they ever get a chance to meet him, just realise what a good guy he is, and he deserves everything he's getting at the minute. And I think there's more to come. Yeah,
definitely agree with that. We had him on the show a month or so ago, and he's a really down-to-earth guy, and a lot of people are pinpointing that World Cup success that he had with Going Price last November as being the catalyst for what he's gone on to achieve over the last 6 months. Firstly, how many times does Jonny send you a picture of his World Cup gold medal?
Well, I don't know. I'm locked in that. No, I'm only joking. Yeah, he actually mentioned it on a podcast I did with him earlier on, and he was... I made the point, he said he's got his gold medal, but I made a point, I've got 2 silvers, so 2 silvers make a gold, so we're level there. But, winning that World Cup, I said it could lead on to bigger things, the taste of glory, and it has. He's got the Masters, he's got the Premier League, he's won 3 floor tournaments this year. You could argue he's been the best player this year. He has been the best player this year, and he's just gone from strength to strength, and the interesting to see what he can do at the match play now. Never won a game there, but, wow, he's going there as confident as he'll ever be. I don't see that run continuing.
And it is a golden period for Welsh darts right now. We had Going Price winning those 2 Grand Slams. We had over in the BDO, Jim Williams, Wayne Warren winning big titles. Going Price last year, of course, and going into this year, winning the World Championship, becoming world number 1. And now Jonny Clayton, what he's been able to do. It's difficult to probably gauge the uptake of new players because we've not got many local leagues and events going on. But have you noticed the interest in following darts pick up in Wales?
Welsh darts always had a big following. It's... when I was starting out, there was always somewhere to go and play. I mean, I may have to travel down south, but it was always a tournament, and it was always well attended, and it's always had that interest. Not every player has gone on to achieve big things, but what DeWitt and Jonny Clayton have done now, we'll get players playing and thinking, well, let's go to Q School. But they were in Q School in respective years, and in 2014, and Jonny in 2015. In the big scale of things, that's not a long time, is it? we've got one of them's the world number one of them's the Premier League champion, and obviously Gezzy's the world champion. So be patient with it, and that's what you can achieve. It's not a massive amount of time for what they've done. The tour's there for you. The PDCs have done well over this year, but it's a fantastic opportunity. It shows you, if you're good enough, what you can win, and they're going to inspire players, not just in Wales, but across the world, to pick up a set of darts and dedicate themselves a bit more.
Just touching on some of those other Welsh players a little bit lower down in the rankings, we've got Nick Kenny pushing towards the top 64. He's in his second year now. John Worsley won back his tour card this year. One player I've got to talk to you about, though, is Louis Williams, 19 years old on the tour. This is his first year now as well. Talk to me about some of them other players that we're seeing on the tour from Wales now.
Yeah, kid Louis made a good start. I mean, he's a young lad, so he's still got a lot to learn, but steady progress. And I think for him at the minute, it's just about retaining his tour card after the 2 years, and then you make the next step. Like you said, Nick Kenny got on the Worlds in his first year, headed to the top 64, and if he can make the Worlds this year, he'll keep his tour card. That's job done. I think that's what Louis needs to do. And Jonathan Worsley just needs to get that breakaway through onto the telly. He's never made a TV major when he's been on the big stage. He needs to do that, get a taste for it, and then you see if he can reach the next level. But yeah, it's great. Welsh starts flourishing, and it's probably down to the impact of Darwin Price and Jonny Clayton. Wayne Warren as well lifted a title. So yeah, they're all contributing factors that can only bode well for Welsh starts.
Well, let's get on to you then. And we last had you on the show, had a look back May 2017, a few days later, ahead of the PDC World Cup. You and Darwin Price, you beat Raymond van Barneveld in the second singles of the final. You go 5-0, your own record for that weekend, and 1-1 in the final. You lose out 3-1 in the final. What memories stand out from your run to a second PDC World Cup final?
Yeah, it was just, I was well edgy in the first two games. I don't think I played well, but then once we got to the final day, I sort of relaxed, and you kind of knew at the time. I thought, getting to the final, I'd like to win it, because I knew that the rankings was getting close and I was going to slip out of the team. So to get to the final, I'd like to have won it, but on my last attempt to get to a final, I thought I played well and was good. It was a long time ago, obviously not playing darts at the minute, so you sort of clutch to those memories. But no, it was fantastic, and and I'm glad that Wales have gone on won the World Cup since, and I'd like to have done it as a player myself, but I did pretty much everything else in the World Cup but win it, so I look back on my time playing for Wales as only good memories.
Well, that was your second year teaming up with Darwin for Wales, and that final coming not long after we'd seen him reach the UK Open final, being up close with him that weekend for the World Cup final run. Could you tell then that he had a very bright future in the game?
Yeah, you just knew he was so confident. He just sort of rubbed off on me for that weekend, and it was like there was no selection headaches, because he just, even though he's a high ranked player, he's leaving it all to me, and he goes, I go, what do you want to do? And he just goes, leave me where I am. He was confident he was going to go on and win. And he said, you'll win the second game. And we did that. We did it in every game, but the final, we absolutely breezed the final. We survived the scare in the first round. From there, we were pretty much unstoppable, and his confidence rubbed off on me. And he's just a confident player. Jonny will reflect on it as well. Confidence is half the battle, and going from strength to strength. And we're looking forward to seeing him back playing. He's not played a lot this year. He had lucky COVID test, and not a lot of events going on. So the sooner we see him on that big stage playing again, the better. But fantastic for him. World champion and world number one. It doesn't get much better.
Yeah, we can't wait for that. And when we spoke to you in the build-up to that event, we spoke about how you were battling with the dartitis that had crept into your game. How hard was it to control that, and at the same time trying to still compete with the world's best on the tour?
Yeah, it was hard, and eventually it kind of got to me. It kind of battling it so long. I mean, I know it looked a bit better at the end, but the placing of my fingers on the darts and just the edginess, and it eventually got the better of me. I mean, it's hard to recover from. I picked up some steady results in the midst of all that, but it never completely disappeared, and it affected my confidence, it affected my technique, and it's played its part on my shoulders. I've got a problem on my shoulder now, maybe from just lunging darts, repetitive strains, and it had lasting damage for me, and it'd been nice to sort of have a break from the game and reassessing, and I don't throw a lot of darts at the minute, so I'll have to maybe get back throwing and start enjoying it, and we'll see where we'll go from there.
Well, away from the hockey, you have forged a very successful career on the other side as a pundit and commentator in the last few years. When did you first get approached or get the idea to give that a go?
Well, I was asked when the BBC started doing the Championship League of Darts, they wanted new faces, so they went with me and Paul Nicholson, and then I enjoyed that. It was the most nerve-wracking thing ever at the start, and but from there I got a phone call off Sky. I think Wayne Mardle put my name forward, and then my boss Rory's give me many chances, and it's been good. I mean, it's going to be my 4th match play with Sky this year, so I think I've taken to it okay. But I enjoy it. I like it. I like the research side where you've got to find something different, something just interesting to talk about. But I work with a good team as well, and that helps. If you work with good people, you're going to do your job well. And I enjoy it. I never once go into work as a commentator thinking, I don't want to do it today. I like the job. It's fun, and I'm lucky in that sense, blessed. And if you can't play, it's the next best thing. So I like watching. I like being involved in the sport, and still get to see some of my friends around on the circuit as well. So yeah, it's good. I've been lucky, but maybe an opportunity I created for myself, and yeah, hopefully I can keep going from strength to strength. You've never stop learning in that side of work.
Yeah, it definitely comes through when we're watching, and fast forward to now, we've seen you on a lot of the darts coverage. You are one of the busiest people there is. The BBC, you mentioned there, Sky, ITV, the Pro Tour you've done recently as well. I personally nominated you as my commentator of the year for our 2020 awards. So how much have you enjoyed that role so far, and I guess really what have been the standout moments so far from being in the commentary box?
Yeah, I really like it. One of my standout moments it's got to be this week. That final night on the Premier League of the league, I thought was one of the best nights of darts action in the Premier League's ever had. I know you've had the 2-night darts, just what was at stake, and then the finals, and then being involved in the World Final this past year, again, when seeing Gerwyn Price lift the title, it was nice, but just to get involved in a game, and sometimes you can have a game that goes back at 2 big finish, but it's the close, nervy games that mean a lot, particularly like the Grand Slam, the Premier League, when there's certain permutations. But no, I like it, and you learn the way players go and what they do, and yeah, I enjoy it. Might be something I can, if I do ever return to playing, I can, have a different approach, maybe picking up different ways, the way players go for finishes and stuff. But no, I couldn't really pinpoint a certain time, but no, it's really enjoyable, and I never sort of shut away from the challenge. I like the Sky part where you work as a team, but then I did the Super Series where I was working on my own, and I enjoyed that, work with different people. I enjoy it, and yeah, I like the challenges it brings.
You mentioned last week the Premier League. We've got to mention stepping into the commentary box to call a game at such short notice when Wayne Mardle lost his voice after Jose threw the 3 tops for the 120. Talk us through that.
Yeah, I was just sitting there, and obviously when you're not commentating, you watch the game because you might have to do a roundup at the end. It's just taking out some key points, and then all of a sudden I just got the nod to go into comms. He'd silence Wayne Mardle, but yeah, I just raised myself down there. It was fine. I didn't have the notes and stuff on that game because I hadn't made notes, but I'd made notes on all the players, and I generally know a lot about the players anyway, so it was fine. I liked it, and like I said, it's just another challenge. I like what they chuck at me. I've had a few goes of being a lead commentator as well. I like that, and yeah, long may it continue. I like things being chucked at me, and it's a good way of learning.
Definitely. Well, you mentioned the World Match Play. That is going to be the next big event for the PDC in around 6 or 7 weeks' time. We've still got 8 events before the cut-off. Jonny Clayton, he'll be there regardless, but as a seed or as a Pro Tour qualifier, that is the big question. Does part of you want to see him stay outside the top 16 so we could see him draw a Gerwyn Price or a Michael van Gerwen in round 1?
Yeah, and I think the top 16 want him to hop into the top 6, well, not the 16th spot, but then the top players like to see him hop in. But either way, if Jonny goes there seeded or not, he's going to be a problem, isn't he, for someone? And not got a great record there, but he hasn't won a game there, but I expect that to change. But it throws up some great draws, the World Match Play. You've got seeds in there out of form. You've got Crosses, your Glenn Durrants, who players who are outside. I think I fancy that, but then all of a sudden they'll return to form, so it can change. But I'm looking forward to the confirmed field. Lots of chopping and changing still to happen though later events. It'll go down to that last event and even go down to the last game of that event. You never know, but looking forward to the 8 Pro Tours, see what comes. Then obviously being back at the Winter Garden, it will be a massive incentive to get yourself qualified.
I know you touched on it a bit earlier about your future plans as a player. We saw you drop off the tour a couple of years ago. We've not seen you go to Q School yet. We saw a picture from you on Twitter in January with a set of windmill darts. You said you were enjoying throwing with them. So what is the next step for you in your playing career? Would you like to make a comeback?
I don't know. I mean, I was practicing hard at the beginning of the year with my new darts. I've had major issues with my shoulder. I've had an injection on it. I'm still having physio now. My shoulder's dropped over time, so I'm having treatment, and maybe because of that repetitive action and obviously when I had dart, I was lunging, so or could have done all sorts to it. But at the minute, until my shoulder's back, how I feel confident. I could throw the odd game here and there, I'm sure, but I think to throw a lengthy season would take its toll. And at the minute, you've got to want it, and at the minute I don't. So it is what it is, and I'll just bide my time. I don't see myself going back next year. You never know the year after, but at the minute I'm quite happy with what I'm doing. So I think that's the key. Happiness is key before anything, and that's the key for me in a minute. That's the decisive factor.
Definitely. Well, lastly, away from the darts, we know you're an avid football fan. We won't mention the Europa League final last week, but how about Wales? We know football's coming home this summer, but how well are Wales going to do in the Euros?
Do you know what, they've got a hard group, but I'm convinced they can get through it. It's a tough group with Turkey, Switzerland and Italy, but just to have that taste last time in 2016 and to see him back there again, and obviously the manager's not going to be there, but it'll be good. I'm looking forward to seeing him play, and it's just, we're a good country that come together with things like that. We're a very passionate country, and I'm looking forward to just chilling out, a few beers with a few of my mates, and watching some of the games. And I think, regardless of what happens, like I said, they'll make a good account themselves. That they'll give it everything, and you never know. Who knows? They might repeat what happened last time. What a treat that was, and it just had the nation standing fantastic. And there'll be great memories of that, and pressure on the players because of that. But I think we're all realistic to know what Wales can achieve, and looking forward to seeing him play in a major tournament again. It's great, because I never thought at one point I was going to see it in my lifetime, and I've seen it twice in 5 years now. I think I have to delay, but no good, and hopefully it can kick us on, and getting a World Cup, that'll be the cherry on the ice on the cake. So I expect big things from the Welsh team. Well, big performances, how far they go, but they'll give it everything, and look forward to it.
Good luck to Wales in the Euros. Keep up the great work that you're doing with the Sky team. We are really enjoying your coverage and what you bring to the game, and fingers crossed your shoulder gets better soon and we'll see you back playing as well, and it's always a pleasure to catch up with you.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you. Anytime.
Thanks again to Mark for joining us. Now let's talk about the biggest competition that took place last week and came to an end, and that is, of course, the battle of the co-hosts, the Premier League Prediction League. What a competition it was. I had a narrow lead going into the final week. Burton, you came back and took the lead for a couple of nights, but a couple of big nights for me towards the end saw me go 11 points up with 12 points to play for in the final night, and an 86-80 win to retain the title for another year. A close battle as always, but any words for your fans before we get into this next question?
I'm just impressed that I had to get perfect on finals night, and I did get 1/3 of the way in, but then Nathan Aspinall won his 6th leg, and it was a good game to you, and good job. I think this is now, is it 4-1 or 3-2 to you? I don't answer that. All I know is you were definitely ahead of me all time. I did win at least one year, though. Congratulations.
Very kind of you to say, and of course we'll be back again next year to see if I can win it for a 3rd year in a row. You never know. But let's talk about some of the darts that we have seen last week and some of the shots that we've seen as well. We saw Jose de Souza attempt to break the internet, if you like, with the free tops on the 120 checkout, and in the online league as well, Diogo Portela doing a dab with his final dart, going for the 180, not quite pulling it off. What's the best exhibition shot that you've pulled off or attempted in a match?
I think I've mentioned this one on the show before, but if not, here it goes. It has to be, this was a few years ago now. I still have photos of it. I was on 84, playing, I think it was 301 double in, and I can't recall if my opponent still hadn't got it in or had just got it in last turn. As a friend of mine, and I asked him, "Are you worried? Are you nervous?" He's like, "No, because you can't hit the double." So jokingly, I went double 14, double 14, double 14 to check out 84. So that has to be the best exhibition shot I've ever attempted and pulled off, because, well, I mean, it's the only exhibition shot I've ever pulled off in a match.
Very nice, and we couldn't not talk about those free tops that Jose did, because it's got so many views across a wider audience since it happened, not just your hardcore darts fans, your casual darts fans, loads of people watching it. And I want to give a mention as well that the setup shot that he had for it, he was on 161 and throws a 41 to leave the 120, reminiscent of Ted Hankey when he had the 170 to win Lakeside. The previous shot, he had a 48, he went for the 25 last start just so he could leave a finish. It's sometimes interesting when you see the shot to set up, the shot that people will remember for a long time. But the one that I'm going to pick out as my one, I don't do many, but a 1-3-4 I had, cup final. I was 1-0 down. It was a best of 3. My opponent was waiting on tops. he was probably thinking, well, I'll probably get at least 3 visits to the board with me being on 134, but pulled it out, treble 20, double 17, double top, which was very special indeed. And what did he do? The next visit starts the leg with a 180 and absolutely trounces me for doing something like that. So that's the best one for me. Want to give a shout out as well before we get to our next guest to Low Six, who present this show. Download the PDC Picks app, 18 plus, UK residents only, T&Cs apply. Please gamble responsibly, begambleaware.org, and thanks to them for their continued support. And now we will move into our next guest on this week's show, and it is with the PDC referee, George Noble. I'm delighted to say I'm joined by one of the leading PDC referees, George Noble. Thanks for joining us, George. How are you doing?
Yeah, good, thanks, Alex. Sun's out, so it can't be bad. Yeah, very good.
Happy days. Well, before we look further back, let's start with last week, the Premier League finishing in Milton Keynes, and for the first time this year we had fans back in the venue for a PDC event. What was it like being back on the stage, but with a crowd there again with you?
Hotter. Actually, obviously, when there's bodies in the crowd, the venue becomes a little bit warmer for us on the stage. So, I enjoyed it. I didn't enjoy not having a crowd, but I enjoyed probably the temperature conditions. It's much better with a crowd back. I think the players enjoy it more. I think it leads to better performances. It's just the whole atmosphere. I think obviously it comes across better on television. It's just, and it's great for the fans that have been loyal, have the opportunity to come back into the venues now. And I thought Jonny Clayton was absolutely superb in lifting the Premier League for the first time. He's a serious player now. Jonny's come from, believe it or not, he's still ranked outside the top. I think he's ranked 18th because he decided to obviously win the Masters, the Premier League and the World Cup, and none of them go on your rankings, I believe. Maybe I'm not sure about the World Cup, but I don't think any of them do actually. I think they're invitational tournaments. So yeah, he's definitely not he's definitely not the 18th best player in the world, that's for sure.
No, you're absolutely right. We did check, actually. He's won more money in non-ranking events in the last 6 months than he's won in ranking events in the last 2 years. So that certainly backs up your point there. And we spoke with a few of your fellow referees, Russ Braham and Paul Hinks, last year in the midst of this pandemic. And as you say, we've had a lot of events behind closed doors. You mentioned there the heat is a lot different without having the fans there. But what was it like for you guys? Because you were still doing all the calls the same, the emphasis on the 180s, the 177s. Was it easier not having to worry about a crowd maybe getting out of hand, or did you miss that adrenaline that they provide being there?
I guess I've been doing it that long. It's sort of, to me, it was my actual what I would do refereeing the game. I've done exactly the same with or without a crowd, and obviously tried to come over. But they was feeding in manufactured crowd across the sound system. So although you knew it was there, it's quite weird because it basically it's on. I don't know if it come across on television, but when there was no crowd, they did obviously play crowd background noises, but it was a massive loop. So basically, it was the same. Although it might have lasted, I don't know how many hours, but you'd heard it before, if you know what I mean. It wasn't. So it was obviously artificial. It's definitely better with a real crowd.
Definitely is. And you called the second semi-final on Friday in the Premier League, and surprise, surprise, it goes to a deciding leg. We're going to come back to that a bit later, but Jose de Souza just getting the better of Nathan Aspinall. Jose making a few counting errors, taking out a 47 when he wanted 37. As a referee up there, what's it like watching a player go for the wrong shot?
Well, it's pretty normal for Jose, to be fair. You can see it coming because, he obviously was hit the wrong. I can't exactly recall what he hit the shot before, but I think he hit something like a 17 when he wanted 54. So I know he wants 54, but he never really asks. There is part of the rule where you can actually ask the ref what's left. Quite a few of the players actually do that, but he doesn't. And bless him, he hasn't really got a clue what's left anyway. So he just decides on something. Throws it, hits 17 to leave 37. I then obviously told him he wanted 37. He obviously didn't listen to me and finished 47. But he wouldn't be Jose about that, would he? He's a serious player, that's for sure. He must be the most improved player I've seen. Clayton probably is the most improved, but outside of Jonny Clayton, you'd have to say that Jose de Souza is right up there. His scoring ability is fantastic. I actually believe, his miscounts cost him matches. They cost him legs and inevitably will cost him matches against the top boys, the top echelon of you. Okay, I guess Van Gerwen and Price and people of that ilk, you it is possible that he can lose matches for his canting. I think that's the only thing wrong with his game. Other than that, he just hits 180s for fun and just looks like he loves playing. I think he's a potential banana skin for any of the top boys. I mean, he really is one of the top boys now. So yeah, he's a great player. Yeah,
you're absolutely right. Well, let's get back to you then, and let's rewind back to the start for you in darts. Growing up as a kid in the 70s and then into your teens in the 80s during that first big boom for darts on TV. Were you a fan right from the start?
Yeah, I used to play quite seriously as a kid. Started off, I played for Kent, and then I played for London, and as a junior we won the Youth Cup, and then I actually knocked Wayne Mardell out of the British Teenage Championships a few years back. I'm sure you won't mind me mentioning that, will you, Wayne? But I used to play, and then I played. I was always a player. So I wanted to be a player, but I never made to be the player that you aspire to. I guess I love watching. I love Bristow. I knew her since I guess I was probably 13 years old, and I knew him very well. But he was one of my heroes. I love Bristow, and I like Wilson, Rocky Wilson. So I used to watch. I was an avid watcher, and I used to go whenever I could. And then I guess then I realised that I still like darts, but I actually realised fairly early on I wasn't going to trouble the judge in the winner's circle being a professional darts player, so I had to look to do something else.
Yeah, it's good that you mentioned your playing career, because I was going to come on to that. I was chatting with Peter Wright, I think 5 or 6 years ago now, about his early days in darts, and he mentioned a story about how he went into a pub and he said he wanted to join a team. He beat one of the captains, who then said, you need to go into this pub, and in that pub was Cliff Lazarenko and yourself. He said you were one of the best youth players at the time. Do you recall that first time meeting with Peter?
Yeah, I do, yeah. Pete come, I don't even know how old he was. I don't think he was 18, that's for sure. He's a little bit younger. He's only a year younger than me, Pete. So, yeah, I've known Pete since he was 15, 16. And, I recall it. He was always good. He was always a good player. And you thought that, he's one of the lads who's one of the best players in the area at the time was a guy called Ian Coble, and he said to me, this Peter Wright said he's going to be really good. And I was like, do you think so? I think he's alright. I'm not sure. But obviously, it's quite funny really. We used to play in the same, it's my dad's pub, basically, and the little Derby and Plumstead, and Pete used to come in there as a kid, started playing with us in all the leagues, and me and him used to play. There's pictures of us playing pairs, and one of them was online the other week, me and him in a pairs competition, lost in the final of a big pairs competition. We played pairs together back in the day, but obviously I went down the ref route, and he persevered trying to become a professional darts player, and to be fair, hasn't done a bad job.
No, he's got there in the end after some ups and downs. And speaking of your career as a referee, I was reading up that it came a little bit by chance back in 1992, I believe, almost 30 years ago now. Can you talk us through how it all started?
Yeah, well, I was at a tournament one day, and I can't remember. I lost in the earlier rounds, and the referee was supposed to turn up to referee the finals, and he never turned up. So they asked for a volunteer. Did anyone want to ref it? No one did. I said, I'll have a go. So I just went up there and refereed 2 semi-finals in the final of a fairly big local tournament, nothing major. And a guy used to be, which through my playing days, Phil Jones, who was the MC for London, was actually he was there, and he was going away with. He used to be Bobby George's MC, so he used to do all Bobby George's work, all his exhibitions and everything, and he was away with his business for a few weeks, and asked if I was interested in covering. So I said, yeah, I'll do it. But back in it, I remember it like it was yesterday. I was so nervous doing a first exhibition. Bobby had given me I think Maria wrote out the words I had to say, and I had a clipboard and a microphone and was shaking like a leaf. It was quite, looking back on it, it's quite funny. But yeah, that's how I sort of started off, and then I got recommended by Bobby to Martin Fitzmaurice back in there, and then obviously I knew Martin as from a youngster when I used to play. They invited me along to do a test tournament, and the rest is history, really. So I went to work for Bobby for 6 weeks and done 6 years. He's still a really good friend of mine, and I guess without him I wouldn't be where I am today. I learned a lot from him, grounding wise, and it's okay. You learn. I think you learn depending on what you want to do. You learn your trade. I learned my trade in the pubs and clubs with Bobby George. Comparing his shows and building up. You just build up a bit of confidence, standing in front of people and talking to a microphone when I guess I wasn't. You would worry what people would say back to you or what you think. But now it's just like water for ducks back. I think I've done it that long, like Russ has. I mean, he's got his bus pass now, Russ. Bless him. But he's been doing it. Yeah, we're doing it. I think I started the year before him in the BDO, and then he started the PDC. But funny enough, we've known. He's known. I mean, you ask Russ, he's known me since I was 9. It's really weird. We lived in the same area, and I used to start playing darts as a little kid in one of my dad's pubs, and Russ used to play in the darts team. So that's how I've known Russ since I was 9 years old. So it's amazing that back from then, I mean, we've both gone on to be, work for the PDC as referees, and it's mad. It was only sort of 4 of us really. It's only 4 reps, and we're 2 out of 4, and we've known each other that long.
Blimey, well, it was a fairly quick rise, wasn't it, after that, to call in at your first BDO World Championship not long after that. What do you remember about the first time calling at Lakeside? I'm assuming there might have been a few nerves for that first occasion.
100%. I was nervous, yeah. And it's apparent as well. You can tell when someone's... I mean, I watch refs now. I mean, looking back at myself, I was very nervous, The leg was shaking, and you don't want to get something wrong, and you put yourself under pressure. I mean, I guess you probably wouldn't be there if you couldn't do it, but some people sink and some people swim. I think the first year, the more, I think the latter part of the week you start to become less nervous, and obviously as time goes on, but the first your first match, well, it's just lucky. I was just sort of lucky to get through it without doing something wrong. I can tell that when I watch new refs now that that everyone improves as well. Not because I think like tone wise, delivery wise. I think that the big mistake a lot of refs make is they try to. I used to probably do when I first started. They try to do everything too quick. It's okay if you take a breath just to figure something out before you say the score. It take ages. Don't get me wrong, but the quicker the better. But I mean, sometimes they might do something that's not quite correct that you're not expecting. It's okay to take a breath and work it out. Just be right. Try to be right and not wrong. It's easier to jump in quick and get it wrong, and then if you take an extra second to get it right. But that comes with experience. I think that's something you learn over the years, just to try and do it at a pace. I think also you need to go to the pace of the game. That's the fast players. You don't need to drag out an 180 till you can just cut that off. I try to get the calls finished before the player starts to play his next start. I mean, sometimes it's fairly challenging if you've got Ricky Evans versus Yellow Glasses. But I think really a referee's job is to not to be the star of the show. The referee's job is just to do the scores and be in the background. And you only really should be recognised if you get something wrong, and then you get ridiculed for that, because everybody loves to do that. To get something wrong is brilliant for social media. You absolutely can't. No one says. You don't get a social media post saying, do you know what, you've done a whole tournament, you didn't make a mistake, well done. You just get, you got that wrong. But that's the way it is.
Yeah, well, you make the switch over to the PDC in 2007, but before then I've got to mention the last Lakeside final that you were a part of, Martin Adams and the late Phil Nixon, one of the best ever world finals, one of my favourite games of all time. You came in for the second session with Martin leading 6-0. Could you believe you were still up there on a stage an hour later and it was 6-all?
No. In a word? No. That was obviously my last hoo-ha at the refereeing BDO tournaments, and no. I mean, I thought I'd played it perfect. I mean, I've been doing it for a few years then, and when you first start, you want to do finals, and then when it get, when it goes on a little, you get a bit further into your career. You don't really need to, you don't crave the finals as much, and you just get on with what you're doing. So I thought I played it like, I could get 3 legs here. This is absolute Christmas. I'm going to get away with doing hardly anything. Long story. Well, you saw what transpired. It went from 6-0 to 6-all, and then Martin then fell over the line to win 7-6. I come off the stage and I couldn't repeat what was on my phone. First message was turned on. Bruce Spenley sent me a message. I've done a bit of work with Bruce on the WDT and the IDL. Lovely man. For my money, probably up there with the best refs that ever graced the game. I'd say Bruce, for me, tone-wise, was the best. He sent me a message that I couldn't repeat, but I got a few. One from Russ, one from explaining how not to do things, basically.
What a career you've had since then in the PDC, just picking out some of the 9 darters that you've been involved with. The first one in a PDC World Championship, the 2 by Phil Taylor in the 2010 Premier League final, Adrian Lewis in the 2011 World Final, Brendan Dolan, the double in, double out at the World Grand Prix. Are there any standout moments, matches that spring to mind straight away when you get asked what's your favourite of all time?
I guess Adrian Lewis, Phil Taylor semi-final of the Grand Slam. I ref that. It was an amazing game, absolutely amazing game. I think obviously the Phil doing a 2 9s in one match, still never been done. It's never ever been done again. To be fair, Michael Van Gerwen's done it in a Pro Tour event, but that's a little bit different to doing it on the stage in the Premier League. I think, I guess that one. And the ones I've been involved in. I think one of the best things I've ever seen in darts. It never actually happens. And Van Gerwen was missed double 12 back-to-back 9s in the. I think Russ was reffing that in the World Championships. He missed double 12 back-to-back 9s. Things like that. Just they're the things you want to be involved in. They're the things that you'll remember when I remember. When you hang up your microphone, if you like, and you're not a referee anymore. They're the things that you'll remember. Some of the great matches and the 2 9s from Phil. Yeah, there's been some fantastic performances. Things like that. I remember the 9s, but I guess that sticks out more than anything. 2 9s in a match. That'd probably be I guess I don't think it was the best standout match, but it was probably the best standout moment.
A very special moment, and I touched on it earlier about the last leg deciders. Another of your fellow PDC referees, Owen Binks, said to mention, why do you always seem to ref last leg deciders? Tiebreak Noble, is it? I believe it stemmed from the Euro Tour for Noble, is that right?
Yeah, it's amazing. It's a standing joke. I do a lot of the Euro Tours with Russ, and we used to basically toss up to see who goes first. And like Russ and me are probably as bad as each other trying to. So basically, if you lose a toss and you go, I'll have to work it out. But if you either go first or second, if you go first, I think you wind up doing the final. If you go second, you don't. So you get an extra game. So whoever wins the toss always chooses to miss the final. Anyway, so I would go. Russ would. It's amazing. We do the same amount of matches, and I'd wind up. He'd do the. We've done a whole European event where he's done the final, an extra match, and I've wound up doing 50 legs more than him, which sounds impossible. But it's a standing joke. Phil Barskall's at the Noble, because the amount of last leg deciders, and if the match goes 5-5 in the European Tour event, like the production crew, I've been friends with the production crew for over 20 odd years. Keytown, Robert, Loon that owns Keytown, and all the lads that work for him. So you have to keep your eyes on the board. Otherwise, if you used to look to the side, not a lot of people know this. They would at 5-5. They'll hold a sign up, and trust me, you don't want to read what's on the sign. So there's always something different on the sign. But if you read it, you start laughing, and then the camera would be on you, and you'd be looking at it. You wouldn't be able to stop laughing, and it'd just be a disaster. But yeah, unbelievable the amount of last leg deciders I do. I just don't get it. Just don't get it. And obviously, Bray thinks it's hilarious. He always does less than me, but he's old. So.
Well, away from the PDC, you're also part of Modus. What's your role with them? And we should mention as well, they're co-promoting the new World Seniors Championship next year. How much are you looking forward to that and seeing some of the legends back on stage?
Yeah, I think that's going to be a great event. If I'm honest, I don't have too too much to do with the World Seniors event. That's Jason heads that up. But I think it's a. I think it's definitely grown leg. It's definitely grown. It's got legs, and I think that there's plans to put it on the television as well. I believe that's looking like that's going to happen. But that's all I know. I won't be able to say any more than that. But I believe the tickets go on sale at 10 o'clock this morning, which I would expect is planned at the Circus Tavern. All the big names are in it. Phil Taylor's going to be in it. Why wouldn't it? I mean, all other sports have senior tours. I mean, I know it's different to a lot of the sports, but like obviously tennis has some form of seniors tours. I know there's definitely a golf one, and I think there's probably room for it in this. People, the older generation of fans would like to see the old stars of yesteryear, and I think there is a place for it in the game as long as it's done correctly. I think Jason Francis is also involved with the World Senior Snooker Tour, which is also a great success. So I think between the two Jasons, I can see it going. I can see it going a long way. I mean, but as I said, I don't have that much to do. I know a little bit about it. I'm more involved in the online darts live league that's being shown at the moment. So I'll be more involved in that than seniors tour.
In quite a bit of the online league, and it's something that's really taken off during the last 12 months or so. We think back to when it started last year during the first lockdown, people still playing at home, and now you've got players playing in person. And we've seen quite recently as well the prize fund has come in for the Champions Week. I think £10,000 the prize fund. So it's something that has really taken off, and especially at a time when there's not a lot of darts going on for these players underneath the 128 on the main tour.
And that's what we're trying to do. I mean, it's a great concept for the players that are outside of the 128 and do play a lot of online tournaments. And actually the players, without going too far into it, there's obviously prize money involved, but they all get a daily appearance fee anyway. So they're paid every day they take part. And obviously the £10,000 prize fund, £10,000 prize fund has come on every fifth week now. Incidentally, that's about to be raised after week 5. We go into the second cycle for the next 5 weeks. That's going up to 12,000, and there's plans in the next phase after that to take it up even further. And we're hoping to, we want to move the first prize fund. We want to move that as soon as we can from 5 to 10,000, the first prize. And really start to build momentum with it. But it's and now we've got a collaboration now with. MAD, the Modern Amateur Darts, where they're running qualifiers, online qualifiers. So we're actually going to give the winner a place in the league for a week, which is a good incentive to all the players. At the moment it's run on an invitational basis, but that's, obviously we needed, once we got the tournament up and running, we need fresh players to come through. I mean, the standard is just improving all the time. And we're hopeful that Modern Amateur Darts will unearth some more unknown talent for us. I think it's a good way, a stepping stone, if you're outside of the top 128. And what we have, we want to work alongside the PDC in relation to like Challenge Tour events. We don't have any plans to run the online darts league over Challenge Tour weekends or anything like that, or when it would clash. We would not run the online darts league, so all the players would go to play, rightly so, in the Challenge Tour, where they've got a chance to win the Challenge Tour and obviously qualify for their World Championships. So I think this is a great starting point for them, where they can learn, apply their trade and get practice in to go on to the Challenge Tour, and then try to qualify through the Challenge Tour for the World Championships. So, and also, there's prize money to be had in the online darts league. So, a stepping stone to the Challenge Tour, then on to the PDC Tour, is where we see ourselves, really.
Definitely, yeah, it's been good to see it grow. And lastly, I know I've took up a lot of your time, so before we let you go, the world slowly getting back to normal, what are you most looking forward to when more of the restrictions start to ease? We know you're a big sports fan and you support Millwall. Is it going to the Den to watch and play again?
Possibly. I'm probably more looking forward to going on holiday. And I watch the news every morning to see if they've stopped it. I mean, it's want to, it'd be great to go back to normal. I mean, yes, I'd like to go and watch Millwall back at the Den. It's great to go back to normal without having to think sometimes when, I drive somewhere and I think I've forgotten a mask. Oh, I ain't got my mask on me, so you've got at least a mask in the car. Or it's just, go to a darts event. We have to, when we go to the Premier League, we have to obviously, rightly so, we have to isolate the PCR test and isolate for 24 hours and things, just things like that. I think we all know coronavirus is here to stay. I think it's how you manage it onwards. I would hope the world goes back to normal on the 21st of June when it's said its will. I'm a little bit sceptical after listening to news that may be put back a bit. Hopefully not. But for me, I guess I just want to go on holiday. Have the ability to go on holiday. But a full, hopefully a full crowd at the Winter Garden, darts-wise. I mean, I guess that's a lot of people's favourite venue. It's probably my favourite venue. And it's great when there's a big crowd at the Winter Garden. The atmosphere is fantastic. And hopefully all the fans will be allowed back to make it a capacity. Fingers crossed. I'm hearing positive vibes, but I mean, anything's possible to change. But I'd love to see the Winter Gardens full up come July.
Yeah, definitely. We've all got our fingers crossed for that, and keep up the great work that you're doing with the PDC as a referee and with Modus as well, with the Live League as well. It's a pleasure to chat to you, George, and best of luck for the rest of the year.
Thanks very much, Alex. Cheers.
Thanks again to George for joining us. Now to some darts away from the PDC, and since we last spoke, Mad dropping some big news announcing their own World Championship lined up for December of next year, 2022. What was your reaction to the news?
I'm glad that they're able to make this announcement, because originally it was supposed to be last year, but obviously nothing that was supposed to happen last year ended up happening for obvious reasons. And I think it's wise that they're not trying to rush to get something on this year. If they were able to, great, but you don't want your first World Championship to just not come together. And I feel like this is the smart move to make sure that you have a year and a half, make sure that you have the time so that the world will be, what we've been saying all along, back to normal. Because right now parts of the world are somewhat back to normal, but plenty parts aren't. Plenty parts of the world, things are getting even worse. Just yesterday, as the time we're recording, a couple days ago by the time you're listening, or if you're listening well in the future, a long time ago. But CONMEBOL stripped Argentina from hosting the Copa America in football because, they didn't say why, but almost certainly because the COVID situation has gotten out of hand there. So while things are improving in Europe, improving in North America, things are getting worse in many other places as well, including places that have had it under control pretty much the entire time. Vietnam and Thailand and Japan and a lot of places in East and Southeast Asia that have been able to get COVID under control from the start. Things are getting out of control now. So I think not trying to rush something so that come a year and a half from now, when hopefully the entire world has everything under control and you can actually have a world championship, waiting till then makes sense. And to get all the logistics in place, to make sure you have a full season, to get all the qualifiers out. I like that they have decided to wait. I want to see, more about what happens, what they plan to put together. Hopefully, these title belt matches are great, but hopefully they can stage some more events as we get closer to it. So I want to see more before I say what I fully think about this. But I'm glad that they're not rushing, and I'm glad they're taking their time to make sure they do this right, because that's the most important thing, that they do it right.
I'm with you there, and I can't remember if it was Barry Hearn or Matt Porter. I think it was Matt Porter, but when we had him on the show last year and we asked him a question about what do you think about darts underneath the PDC now that the BDO's gone and there are other organisations that are looking to move things forward, and he said there was kind of a power grab going on at the minute between the WDF, MAD, UKDA putting on their own events, and it is going to be interesting, isn't it, when things do get back up and running across the world, and with these tours in particular as well, is which players are going to be entering which events, because there's going to be more options now than ever before. The the BDO was what we had before with the World Championship, the World Masters, the World Trophy, those 3 big events each year on TV. But now we are getting Mad with their own World Championship, which kind of took me by surprise a little bit. I didn't expect there to be a World Championship from them. So it kind of shows you that they are, well, with a World Championship, looking to go further afield with this, looking to venture into different markets and really take things over. So you're going to have that coming up next year. You're going to have the WDF, of course. They've got the World Masters lined up for later this year, their first big event since the BDO's demise, taking things over. I'm not quite sure how it's going to go, because you have got all these players that will be spread across all these events. Are they going to put all their eggs in one basket on Mad, or are they going to focus on the WDF, or are they going to do a mix of both, and maybe towards the end of the year when the qualifying is getting close to the finish line, do they focus more on the events they're more likely to qualify for? So it's another event for the players to enter, isn't it, for next year? And when things do get back up and running, we'll see which players go into which events. And for us following darts, I think it's going to be good, because we're going to see more events, but it's going to be a bit of a nightmare, isn't it, for these organisations to try and attract their players to their events and try and get as quality a field as possible and get as much coverage on their events as possible. So yeah, very interesting time for darts next year, I think.
Now, we're recording this on the last day of May. June will, I guess we say should, can't say anything guaranteed, but should and hopefully will signal the resumption of the WWF ranking events, along with other events too. Of course, the WWF announced their new ranking system in January of 2020, and then a couple months later, everything went. Coronavirus pandemic paused everything, so there hasn't been a ranking event now in 15, 16 months. But what are you most intrigued by to follow as we enter summertime?
I think it's just going to be good to see these events happening again and these tours happening again, because it has been a long time since we've been able to follow darts really closely and with something riding on it, aside from the PDC, for a long time, since the pandemic kicked things off last February, March last year. It's been over a year now since we've seen some events of this magnitude, and with these ranking points on the line and with these different players involved in them, to see how they're getting on and see where they could be heading. So I think all of it, really. I've got to say, I don't really have an allegiance to any of the organisations. I'm just looking forward to seeing which players turn up for the events and who manages to win them, who's showing some good form going into the rest of the year. And, okay, looking a bit further down the line, but Q School next year, if they decide to go into that, who could potentially be the ones that we see making that leap onto the professional tour next year. But I think with the WDF, it is going to be a slow start to get things running again, isn't it? Because as you touched on there in the last question we were talking about, it is a worldwide pandemic, and some countries are further ahead with things than others, and they're going to take a bit longer to get things going. And one of the big things as well is travelling, all the restrictions that are in place at the moment, where you can and can't go, or what the things you have to do when you come back or before you go. It is going to put people off travelling for a little while, I think. So we'll see it slowly come back to WDF. I think they've got an event in New Zealand in a couple of weeks' time. They've got the one in Gibraltar. The Mad have got an event on the same weekend as well. But we're probably looking towards September time, aren't we? I think the Dutch Open is the first weekend of September, and then the following weekend is the England Open. So hopefully by the time we get to September time and towards the end of summer, we will be in a much better position, and we will see these tours get back up and running, and we'll see events week in, week out, and we'll push towards these big events, the World Masters that I mentioned, and then I guess the Mad have got a big weekend lined up for the end of the year as well. So good to see things get going again, hopefully in a few weeks.
And it is still hopeful. You know, you're looking at, if you go on the WDF website and you look at the calendar, still nearly half the events for June are listed as cancelled. You know, the Melton Darts Classic in Melton, Victoria. Victoria currently under a lockdown. It's cancelled. The Canadian Open is listed as cancelled, and 2 events in Austria at the end of the month, the Austrian Open and the Vienna Darts Open, are both listed as cancelled. But there's still 5 events currently set to go. You mentioned the one in New Zealand that's kicking it off, but also events in Hungary, another event in New Zealand, and one in the United States and one in Gibraltar that are all set to go as things currently stand. And even more as we get further in the year, leading up to the first major of the calendar. They're not called majors, they're called platinum events, with the Dutch Open at the beginning of September. I'm glad that it's, as you said, that we're able to talk about something other than PDC and throw in there and other than online darts, because we did for a short time have online darts, the only thing we could talk about. And I had trouble getting interested in that. I watched a little bit of it, but I really didn't have much interest in watching all of it. I am excited, though, to see the WDF events go on and hopefully lead up to a successful return of the World Masters at the end of the year. But I'm also intrigued to watch the next weekend of Pro Tour events, or I shouldn't say week of Pro Tour events, or half of a week, 4 events in the middle of the month in the PDC. It's good that there'll be darts from, well, not both sides of the divide, because there's not a divide anymore. There's multiple different organizations. Maybe there'll be a divide on the amateur side. But I'm intrigued to watch the return and see how players who we haven't heard from in well over a year now take to getting back into competitive action, and hopefully they'll be able to bring their best stuff. We don't know. They've probably been playing domestically and we just haven't heard about it because, well, we haven't followed the Hungarian league as closely as maybe some of our listeners would have wished we have. But we'll get to see how those players do shortly. We'll just have to hang tight a couple more weeks for that.
Definitely will. Well, speaking of online darts, let's move into our next guest on this week's show. He's the organiser of the Online Darts World Championship. Here's our chat with Ivan Mocic. I'm pleased to say I'm joined once again by the creator of the World Online Darts organisation, Ivan Mocic. Thanks again for joining us. Ivan, how are you doing?
Hi, my friend. First of all, I would like to say hello to all listeners and thank you once again for hosting me again in your show. Really, it's an honor to be part of your show. I'm fine. Hope all darters around the world are also fine, and I know that we are all waiting to be again together on the live darts and things like that. But when people don't have any idea to how to play darts, or they are at home because of that, we are here for them to do our tournaments and things like that.
Good to hear. Well, now, would you believe it was exactly a year ago to the day since we had you on as a guest for the first time? And for those of our listeners who missed it, or just to remind them about the World Online Darts organisation and your role in it.
Yeah, it's more than a year when we start all this. It's really amazing experience, and I personally cannot believe that already is a year and 2-3 months when we start all of this. My role is just one part of this whole organization. I most of the time do contacts with the players, putting scores and things with registrations, but all this won't be. The whole this would be unthinkable without my crew, that I like to say, called crew. And that are, for first of all, 3 guys, Vladimir Godinovic, Bata Jožef, and Zoran Haller, but also and a few guys that was in start with us. Now we, how to say, the job is not so big like in start, and some guys from our crew have some personal stuffs, and but from the beginning and now these 3 men and me do most of the job, so we can say that we are still all together and doing this work for you.
Well, taking it back to the start of the organisation, it was born through the early months of the pandemic as the world shut down, and as you say, it's been running for over a year now. Online darts has really taken off in the last year or so. What's that experience been like running the whole thing?
Oh, believe me, this experience is really incredibly good, and I have said many times I will try to keep this as much as we can, even when everything finally returns to normal, and that is something that we all hope to be soon as possible. But this time, this type of playing darts is something to make darts friendship around the world, and my personal experience with players around the world is something that I will remember all my life, and I hope someday in future see some of that people in some live tournament and drink a beer or something with them and speak about this what we do over the internet and things like that. So really, this experience for me is all good. I didn't have some bad things about this, and really, it's only about this I can speak with nice words. Only that.
When we last spoke, it was just after you'd put on your first World Championship. Dirk van Dijvenbode beating Scott Waits 15-12 in the final to win the title. A few months later, he makes the World Grand Prix final. How impressed have you been with how Dirk, your first world champion, has kicked on in the PDC?
Yeah, that was really something special. And player who is, and before that was a really good player, but after our World Championship, he do some great results, and that is something really nice to see. But I also follow the matches of all the big PDC names with equal enthusiasm and support them when they play on the tour. Honestly, when any of them play, somehow to me is, I don't know how to say, warm around the heart, and is indescribable feeling. Really, I'm happy when I can say that these guys play with us, with some total amateurs around the world, and that is thing that I can't have words to say thanks to them, and Dirk and all other guys that play with us. That is something really amazing, and believe darters around the world will be thankful to them because of that.
Definitely. Well, that first World Championship last year, it attracted an impressive field, more than 1,500 players from 60 different countries around the world. What memories stick out from running such a big online event?
Yeah, running something like this is really amazing. I have to admit, it takes a lot of time and effort, but nice word and from players around the world is something that push all my crew all this time and give us a new strength again and again. And I can say I have only good memories, and it's a great pleasure to connect whole world in our tournaments and create darts friendships around the world. So running something like that, you say 1,500 players around 16 countries is something really, really amazing, and you connect all that players, different time different zones and things like that. But in the end, if people want to find a way, they find a way to play, and that is really something amazing.
And after that, the organisation, you've put on the Champions League. Initially, it was split into 10 different regions. How did that event go, and what events have you put on since we spoke in the last 12 months?
Yes, after World Championship, we organized our Voda Covid Crew Champions League, which was, like you said, group stage with 10 different regions around the world. Was really also one great experience that play, I think, 400 players around the world in I think that at least 3 months they play, and after that we have a final 64 tournament in the end, which winner was Chris Dobie. And after that we have some individual tournaments for our sponsors like Bulls, L-Style, Darts Point, Red Dragon, and things like that. And also that sponsors help us to create our another big project that also is behind us. It's our winter season Covid Crew, a series of 5 tournaments, each tournament for our one tournament for each tournament was sponsored by a special sponsor from us. One was from the Bulls, one from L-Style, one from Custom Made Darts and Gladiator Dartwear, one from Darts Point to Croatia, and one from Red Dragon. And after that we have top 16, and the final winner was Mercy Masande from South Africa. And now we are on World Championship, and after this, who knows what will be next.
Yes, that's what I was going to get onto. Your second World Championship gets underway on June the 7th, so next week, less than a week to go now. Sounds like the interest is still in there for online darts. I know the world is slowly getting back to normal, but for a lot of places, in-person darts is still not possible. So with a week to go, how many entries have you had so far for this World Championship?
Yeah, till today, I think we have already around 600 or 700 registered players around the world. I think it's logical that the interest in online darts has dropped a bit, but because we all, I would say, want to play live darts and things like that, and life is slowly back to normal, thank God. But also, I have admit that the numbers are still quite large, and that a lot of people will continue to use this way of playing as a good training with darts players from all over the world. So I think that our numbers are still great, and for me, it's amazing. Most of people tell me to don't do this because we'll be around 200-300 players, but believe me, these numbers think again will be around 1,000 or something like that. I hope maybe 100-200 smaller, but I think in the end will be very quality and quantity tournament for players around the world, because we in this year have many big names from last year and some new names. So I think for amateur players around the world, this is a really nice opportunity to maybe match up with some PDC name and have memory for a whole life.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned the PDC names. I touched on the two players that got to last year's final. They're both tour card holders on the PDC. You also had Chris Dobie, Luke Humphreys, among others. Can you tell us some of the big names who have entered so far for this year?
Yeah, I maybe it's the best way to tell all names. Some of them are new ones, some the last from last year, but how to say one in order. Our champion Dick Van Duijbond, Chris Dobie, Jermaine Waitemena, Luke Humphreys, Ricky Evans, Ryan Searle, Kim Hybergs, Andy Bolton, Jelle Klassen, Scott Waits, Mike De Decker, Kevin Lung, Kieran Tian, Robbie John Rodriguez, Daniel Larsson, Gordon Glenn Mathers, Richie Edhouse, Gary Blades, Eddie Lovely, Louis Williams, Boris Koltsov, Gerd De Vos, Jose Justicia, Michael Rastovic, Lukas Venig, Pero Ljubic, Florian Campbell, Lorenzo Pronk, Patrick Van den Boegaard, Nico Kurz, Kevin Munch. There is a long list. Merci Masande, like I said, inter-season champion. Matt Campbell, Jim Long from Canada, John O'Shea, Nitin Sharad Kumar from India. Did I forget somebody? Richard Venstra, Francois Schwein, Dragutin Pechniak, John Williams Jones, Benjamin Prattnemer, Danny Van Tripe, Brian Rahman, Lawrence Silligan and Leon Malik, them also from Philippines, but they have some internet connection problems, so we will see will be with us. And I hope some also a few big names. I speak with them and they will connect me till the end of registrations. And I think some a few more big names will be with us. But I think this list is really amazing, and I can't believe that all these players will play with us. It's really something amazing.
Definitely, yeah. What a lineup you've got already, and the beauty of these events, as you say, they are open to anyone to enter from anywhere around the world. So when do entries close, and how can our listeners enter if they want to have a go?
Yeah, this is open tournament. It's free for all, and the way of registration is we have some links that we share around the Facebook page, but also they connect me or some from my crew personally, or over the Instagram or Facebook. That is the way we do all our tournaments, and think that is that is all something simple and for all, and that's the way we take registrations all our tournaments.
The final is penciled in for Sunday the 4th of July. The PDC rules means that tour card holders can't be involved in streaming games, but what are the plans for any coverage of the event? Will we see some games streamed where possible?
Of course, we will cover this event as much as possible as we can with the live stream. Unfortunately, the PDC rule is still in force that we cannot broadcast player matches with the PDC Tour card, but even without that, we will have many great matches that we will live stream on our YouTube channel and in our Facebook group. So definitely we will have really good streams and something that people will have to look.
And lastly, going forward, what have you got lined up for after this World Championship? Could we see it become an annual event, even if things return to normal when they do?
Yes, after this World Championship, certainly we will continue with our tournaments and some leagues. I see definitely in plan have to repeat our World Champions League. Is certainly our next big project, but there will be also many types of tournaments in arrangement with our sponsors. So I promise you that we will continue with our work and help dart players around the world to have good training and meet a lot of people around the world. That is something that motivates us and give us strength, like I said, to continue doing this.
That's great to hear. Well, Ivan, it's always nice to catch up with you. Keep up the great work that you're doing in the world of online darts, and we'll be following the Online World Championship to see who comes out on top. We're looking forward to seeing how it all plays out.
Thank you, man. Thank you once again to invite me. And like I promised, we will continue with this work. And I hope we will see you next year or maybe earlier. But definitely, I promise that we will continue doing this World Championship to something like a good memory for all of us, and continue this, and after this back to normal. And I hope this will help to popularize and promote darts around the world, and that's the most important thing that we want to do.
Thanks again to Ivan for joining us, and we'll finish up the show with some listener questions. We've got 3 to get through before we go, and the first one comes from Andrew Kinsman, who says Dimmy recorded the highest average in the Premier League, also an even higher average against players thrown well against him, and has also lost 3 times on the Pro Tour this year with a 100+ average. Is he the unluckiest player in darts, or is there something about his game that brings out the very best in his opponent?
It's a good question. I don't think he's the most unlucky. I mean, I think he is. He has he's a very middle of the road tempo to him, which does make it easier for players to play against him. He's not fast, he's not slow. He's pretty much, in terms of tempo, fairly average, and therefore he's what most players would expect to get in a random match. So they're more prepared to bring out their best against him, and he's usually going to play at a pretty darn high standard himself. That's going to typically, especially against good players, force them to play near their best. So I think a lot of it does explain itself. He was unfortunate in this Premier League, and he's had some unfortunate performances in the past, but he just won a major last year. He just won the most recent Players' Championship event. So how unlucky is he? He's won two events in the past year, including the second biggest on the calendar, and nearly made the playoffs and the second most valuable in terms of the Premier League. So he's not all that unlucky. I'm trying to think, though, who is the most unlucky player in the world. It's a tough question. Maybe that's a question we should put on the schedule for next week. Who is the most unlucky player in World Darts? Because that would be an interesting thing to discuss. I'm not sure who it is off the top of my head, but I can't say it's Dimitri. He had an unfortunate Premier League. That is for sure. But he's not the most unlucky player in the world.
I think the most unlucky player has to be Kevin Painter. He was always saying, how's your luck, when someone was taking out a big check out against him. But no, with Dimitri, as the question says, he has performed very well to a very good standard. The 100 average across the season, the players against him have averaged 100 overall. But you just got to look at what the other averages were for the season, haven't you? The margins at the elite level at the PDC, they can be very, very small. You've got Jonny Clayton and Jose de Sousa averaging 99 for the season. A point less, you've got 98 averages for Michael Van Gerwen and James Wade. Gary Anderson 97, Nathan Aspinall 97, and Peter Wright, if you take out that third week when he had a mare, his average would have been a lot higher than 96 for the season. So the margins are very small. I know there was one thing that I picked up on from Dimitri's interviews last week, and he was saying heading into that
final game against Jonny Clayton. If he could get his checkouts, like a big checkout or two, then that could be the difference. And I guess we saw that, didn't we, in the final game against Jonny Clayton? His highest checkout was 68, and he did have a couple of darts to get some big shots, like I think it was a 101. He had double 16, 88. I think it was double 16 as well. He missed, and those are the fine margins. If you take out one of those bigger checkouts, that can prove to be the difference. And we saw during the Premier League that he did take out a lot of big finishes. Night one, the 164, which was the highest of the season against Michael van Gerwen. He had a couple of 160s. The penultimate night of the season against James Wade, he took out the 130 in the final leg to get drawn and keep his hopes alive, take it to that final game. So I think he was a bit unlucky not to make the playoffs in the end, but he was very fine margins, and he's only 26 years old. He's got a long future in the game, and it was his debut season, and if he's finishing fifth and only missed out on the final game, then I think he's got a lot to be happy with.
A second question comes from James Barnes. Where now for MVG after losing the semifinals of the Premier League? Could you see him going the entire year without winning a major TV title?
Well, Peter Wright did call it, didn't he? In the second Super Series after he won one of the titles, he said that Michael van Gerwen wouldn't win a TV title this year, and I know he went back on those words as well, and in all seriousness, I do think that he will win at least one title this year, but you've just got to look at some of the performances that he's had against him this year. We've seen players, he's lost that invincibility factor, and there was one of our listeners who tweeted us during last week, and he said he felt that it was Peter Wright beating him in the world final a couple of years ago now. That kind of opened the floodgates for a lot of players to think, well, you've got someone there that's lost all those big finals time after time, had match starts in the Premier League one, of course, and he's beating him in the biggest game there is of the year. That kind of gave a lot of players belief, I think, that they could do it, and they've done it. We've seen Jonny Clayton's got a really good record against Michael on TV in the last year or so. Other players as well that have had a bad record against him, pulling out big performances. Dave Chisnall had such a long run without beating him on TV, and he was able to do it at Ali Pali last year, the tip of the year that you were able to pull out for that one. So I think we are going to see him win a title. It is a lot harder for him now, I think, than it was back in his prime, if you like. I don't know whether he's hit his prime or he's going to come back again, but we're seeing that the depth of talent in the PDC producing these big performances. So it is going to be a lot harder for him this year to get those titles, and confidence plays a big part in darts. And when you're not winning these titles as regularly as he was back in the day, then his confidence is going to take a hit. So I think he is going to have to win one, and maybe then the floodgates will open a little bit, but it's getting more difficult, I think, as time goes on and more titles elude him.
Right now, the question is not just can he win a televised title this year, but the question should be, can he even make a final of any event this year? Because he's not even made the final of a televised or non-televised event through the first 15 events, 16 if you count the World Championships this season. You think eventually he will. It seems ludicrous to suggest that he wouldn't, but we don't know exactly what the schedule is going to be like. We don't know how many more events there are. We don't know how many of them he's going to play. Is he going to go to all of the Super Series? Is he going to go to the Pro Tour weekends if that's what they become later in the year instead of Super Series weeks? And the opportunities are going to become fewer and far between. That said, he's also playing right now at his best he's played all year. He's playing at a standard that more often than not would have gotten him through that semifinal into that final. He had one bad leg when it was 8-all on throw against someone who threw in a nearly unbeatable leg against him. That led to the break, and it led to Jonny Clayton getting over the line. And I don't mean that to diminish what Jonny Clayton did, because Jonny Clayton was playing at that same absurd standard as Michael van Gerwen through that match. That's why it was 8-8 before Jonny Clayton lifted his game. But more often than not, MVG playing at that level, especially what he was playing at that week and the previous week of Premier League, would be enough to at the very least reach the final and probably win it. It just didn't happen to be. So I'm going to say he's going to win a title at some point. He seems to have most of his confidence back and most of his ability back, at least to the level that it needs to be to pip one or two of those over the course of the year. And I think he will.
Final question then for this week, and it was one held over from our last episode, comes from Sean Jakes, who says, if the PDC were to add a second division to the Premier League, who would be in your lineup?
So I'm going to answer a slightly different question because I do think mixing up the Premier League is good. And I like that over the last few years they have. First bringing in the challengers or contenders, and this year going back to the 10 based just on circumstance. I like, things that mix it up. And what could be an interesting twist for 1 year is to have two divisions, but not, an A division, a B division, but a British division and a European division. And the rest of the world can be mixed in however the numbers require for the first stage. And from that stage, you have 8 in each, and the top 4 then go to a second stage that's combined. That could be an interesting twist for a year. And that will allow the Premier League to give more opportunities to some of those players who are on the fringes, but that they haven't given, especially from places that they would like to get more marketability in. Get Christoph Ratajski in from Poland. Bring back Mensur Suljovic, or bring in some other Austrian. Bring in Gabriel Clemens from Germany. It gives an opportunity to get more players in from throughout Europe that have missed out and get on television in those countries. And the top 4 then will meet the top 4 from Britain for that second stage, which will hopefully still have events both in Europe and in Britain. But that's what I'd like to see. That I think would be interesting. Instead of having an A division and a B division, have a European division and a British division, and have the winners of that then meet up in a final stage of 8.
I do like the sound of that. And actually, when I was chatting with Rod Harrington last year on our Darts Legends series, he was talking about how his vision for the PDC is to see more events going to Europe. So a Premier League where you see more nights in Germany and in the Netherlands, in Poland, in Austria, wherever, Belgium perhaps as well, could work very well. That could be an idea that we see. For me, though, I did pick out 10 players, and I was looking at the order of merit and working my way down and picking out a few players maybe a little bit further down the rankings as well. So my 10, if I was going to go with the 10 like they do in the normal Premier League, I'd have had Dave Chisnall, Michael Smith, Christoph Ratajski, who you mentioned, Daryl Gurney, Joe Cullen, Stephen Bunting, Simon Whitlock, Mervyn King, Dirk van Dijvenbode and Luke Humphries. And I was looking at those 10, and of course there's been a few there that have been in the Premier League before. We've seen Daryl Gurney make the playoffs, Simon Whitlock make the playoffs, Chisnall and Smith as well. And you've got a few other players in there who you would probably back to be in the Premier League, the main Premier League, if they're going to carry on the way it is, sooner rather than later. You're looking at someone like Dirk van Dijvenbode, who is continuing to climb up the rankings. You expect him to be in next year, perhaps the year after. He's getting very close. Luke Humphries as well. He's just made a final this year as well on the TV. He's someone who's heading in the right direction. So, yeah, I'd definitely like to see something like this. Whether it happens in the short term, I'm not quite so sure. But, yeah, I think long term we could maybe see something like that.
Now, anything else for this week?
As always, we have to say big thank you to our guests for joining us. Big thank you to everyone for listening. Thanks to our sponsor Low 6 who present this show, and our Dartscast trivia. Our last episode we said who has appeared as a guest on the show the most times. The correct answer was, of course, Dave Parletti. 10 times he's been on the show, and Kevin McAlpine and Henry Deacon both guessing correctly on that one. And here is this week's Dartscast trivia, courtesy of Dylan from Darts Cymru.
Hi guys, it's Dylan here from Darts Cymru, and here's this week's trivia question. Last week, Jonny Clayton became the first player from Wales to win the Premier League. But I want to know who was the first Welsh player to win a major darts title.
And thank you for Dylan for that question. I have an idea what the answer is, but I'm not gonna say it on the show because I want. Well, if I'm wrong, then probably I should say it so that everyone would get it wrong. But we want you to take your best guess and hopefully get it right. And if you're the first one to get it right, you'll get a shout out on next week's show, as we will be back to, well, not much to recap. Maybe we will talk a little bit about the event in New Zealand. Why not? It'll be the only darts event that week. But we will start looking ahead to the next week of Pro Tour events in the PDC. Hopefully I have some guests on that'll be competing in that, and start to look ahead to the World Match Play, which is only a few weeks away now. About a month and a half, less than that, of course, until the cutoff for the World Match Play. See who will get into the triumphant return to Blackpool. But until then, I am Burton DeWitt alongside Alex Moss. Thank you guys for listening. Thanks to our sponsors. Thanks to all of our guests. And thanks to y'all who hang tight for 6 days a week so you can let loose and listen to us on the 7th. And until next time, keep hanging tight.